This is Alexa Linton, and you're listening to the Whole Horse Podcast. I'm coming to you from the Cowichan Valley on beautiful Vancouver Island in Canada, and I'm excited to be bringing amazing instructors from around the world to share their knowledge about all the ways that we can keep ourselves and our horses well and happy, and about some of the cutting-edge techniques, training, and different aspects that are coming into the horse industry and changing it from within. I'm so excited you're here, and I'm excited about the times that we live in and the shifts that are happening in the horse industry before our eyes. Let's get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome. You're here on the Whole Horse Podcast, and you may hear it in my voice, but I am very, very excited about my guest today. I've been wanting to chat with her, interview her for a long time, and we just had a chat before the podcast, and now I'm even more excited. Welcome, Thirza Hendriks. So glad to have you here on the podcast today.
Yeah, so excited to be here. Yeah, it's awesome.
You were telling me that this is your very first podcast,
Yeah,
and I'm stoked to be that person that is interviewing you for your very first podcast. I know there's going to be a lot of people out there that are going to be jumping at the chance to listen, and all the wisdom that you bring, all the knowledge that you bring. So can't wait to dive in here today.
yeah,
Yeah,
me too.
yeah. Yay, good. So before we get going here, Thursday, for those listeners out there that may not know who you are and what you're up to, can you give just shorter synopsis of what you're working on right now, what your work goes into?
Yeah, of course, happy to. Like, short is not really my thing, but I'll try. So yeah, and my name is Thirza Hendriks. I live in the Netherlands, and I've been fascinated by the being of a horse as long as I can remember. I started off as a competition rider, but somewhere down the road, my horses took me to a different path, who led me all the way to like a combination of art and science. So to keep the beauty, but at the same time to also understand a little bit behind it. And that took me to the part of studying biomechanics through whole horse dissections. So yes, I've done some education on biomechanics, but most of it comes from the practice. And my specific interest or research area is how we can use movement as a therapeutical tool to enhance the horse's welfare, and especially the sport horse or the more domesticated horse breeds that we have today. And that has led me to an interesting journey all over the world, in which I feel very humbled and honored to help horses worldwide to rehabilitate them and help them towards stability and balance.
I think that was a beautiful synopsis. Thank you. Short and sweet. And at Thursday, I've been sort of paying attention to your work since I taught in Canberra. We were just sharing that we shared a venue there with our friend Leanne, and your work. It intrigues me on so many levels, and I'm sort of deciding where I want to begin. But I would love to chat to start here about these dissections, because I'm sure certain people um, don't know about the work of Sharon May Davis, don't really understand what
Mm-hmm.
this is all about. So I would love to just dive into that with you. Can you share a little bit
Yeah,
more?
I love to. I mean, because I can already sense that we have the same passion here. I mean,
Yes.
it's just fascinating because I cannot use another word. So, how did I get into it? I mean, because a lot of people ask me that, like, how did you know, or get stuck in that world of doing whole horse dissections? I mean, that's not something you wake up with usually. Like, this is what I'm gonna do. But it's funny because already as a kid, when I couldn't barely talk, I always said, when kids say I want to become an astronaut or a
Hmm.
dancer or a singer, and I always said I want to be a pathologist. And
Wow.
yeah, and that was a real problem when I was young because parents thought I was a really weird kid and a little bit morbid. And I don't know how that came up to me, but apparently now that I'm a little bit older, the fascination still got me. So no,
Yes.
yeah, like I was always just in the horse world in a traditional way. I never had my own horse actually because yeah, here in the Netherlands we usually can't keep them at home, so we need to keep them in livery, which is a luxury good basically. Um, but I grew up next to a stable, and yeah, I loved horses, and my parents were friends with these owners of that stable, and yeah, I just grew up in a traditional environment, so competition riding. And
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't until like a later stage, you get a little bit older and you meet that one horse that just doesn't do it. I think that a lot of people have that same story. I mean, I can make a long
Yep.
story about it, but it doesn't matter. And you have that one horse and you feel like you're at a crossroad, like, am I either going to give up, or that something in your brain tells you, like, no, I need to search deeper for a reason. And I think I just really randomly, like everyone else, I just, what do you do when you have a problem? You go to Google.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just very randomly that when I went to Google and I literally typed in, I have this problem with my horse. What can it be? Um, that I found an article on a website of equine studies, which is by Savannah Vermeulen. And she is the Dutch lady. So she's a tutor of mine and by now also a colleague who invited Sharon May Davis to the Netherlands. And I said to her, because I remember like it was a couple of years ago and Sharon was just in the Netherlands, and I said, I see that you give these dissection courses, but I don't know if it's something for me, because I was also a little bit afraid, because I was like, yeah, but can I participate in such a course? I don't have any knowledge of biomechanics or dissection or anything. So she said, just come and have a talk with me. And we just had a random talk, and I told her about my journey and what I've been with horses in, and what my struggles were. Um, and then she said, if you can do something for me, then you can participate in a dissection. It's like, oh my God, of course. I'll
Mm-hmm.
do that. And that's when it started. And it was, so that first dissection was with Sharon. And it's just, some things in life, it just clicks. And I, from that moment on, I knew like, okay, this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. Like, this is the knowledge that I've been hungry for. Because when a horse lays on the table, yes, it is very sad. But at the same time, there's also so much beauty on there,
Mm.
because the horse is just sharing its life story in a way that it couldn't when it actually was alive. Because a lot of the times when horses are in pain or are having issues or whatsoever, there are a lot of communication issues that we cannot take
Mm-hmm.
up. And for me, that was really almost like an emotional experience to see, wow, first of all, how in awe I was of the body. Like, nature is just so amazing. Like, oh my
Mm-hmm.
God, you have blood vessels and fascia and nerves and whatever. And at the same time, also, like, okay, horses probably deal with so much more than we realize. And we just, I mean, I think there's a whole wave in the equestrian
Mm.
world going on, that we start to realize that if a horse says no, it's for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
But I
Mm-hmm.
still think that wave is too much at the surface. That people sometimes do realize, but not really realize. If you get me,
Mm-hmm.
um, because yeah, and if the horse keeps doing it, then still it's still too much. Like, oh, this horse is just naughty, or we make up
Yep.
human reason for behavior. And that, yeah, it just got me. So from that dissection on, I said, I want to do more. So I just really basically saved all my money and I signed up for all the dissections with Sharon. And yeah, I honestly don't know from that moment on how I got involved. But I said to Savannah, like, I don't know a lot, but I want to learn a lot. So Sharon
Yes.
put you under her wing. Um, can I learn from you, and what can I do? And now we are 4 years later, and I'm organizing dissections. I am having access to research. I am actually involved in her project of saving Bosnian mountain horses, and I feel that I'm leading a very fulfilling and blessed life. Honestly, like it sounds cheesy, but
Mm.
honestly,
Oh my gosh, I feel that, and I feel like we're kindred spirits, you and
yeah,
I, in many
yeah,
ways, with that passion for learning, right? Like
yeah,
that, seeing what you want and going, I don't know much about this, but I know that I want to be helpful and I want to be, I want to learn more and dive deeper, and so I just love hearing that story. And so you were sharing before we got on the podcast about the dissections and some of the sort of intentions or sort of the purpose of the dissections. Would you share a little bit more about that, working with domestic horses as opposed to more sort of feral horses, and what you're
absolutely.
seeing there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then here, before I get started, like the accreditation of these projects really go to Sharon Davis and Savannah
Yes.
Vermeulen. So basically, yeah, as I mentioned, the research that stems from dissections goes in two directions. So one direction is um, how can we deal with issues that we have in a good way. So how can we manage certain issues? How can we learn about new issues? Yeah, because issues are always developing. 30 years ago, the horses were much different than they are today. So also the type of problems they come up is much different than back then. So that is like one strand of the research, that you can learn about certain issues or compensation patterns in the horse's body, and then you can take it into practice as how you can deal with it in a live horse, so that you can learn so much from doing dissections that hopefully you can save horses for ending up the same fate, and that they have to
Yes.
be dissected. And then the other thing that comes out of dissection is, because we see so many horses are actually having problems, is to say how is that, and that we started that they started to look at looking back to more primitive breeds and what the differences are to the domesticates as we are having them today. So more like the sport horse type of
Mm-hmm.
um, horses, and then the more domesticates, so who relate more to the tarpan. And then they found about 34 anatomical differences between these horses and our domestic
Wow.
horses. So then the idea is, and we can manage problems that we have, but wouldn't it be better if we could prevent those issues in the first place?
Yes.
So what we see is that a lot of horses today, for example, they are actually hypermobile. And they, because we wanted them to be flexible and to be spectacular and blah 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 blah.
Yep.
But what then they are lacking is strength. And strength is not something. If a horse is hypermobile, that is a condition it will have to deal with for its life. And a
Yes.
lot of horses today, I believe, do not need more flexibility or suppleness, but they actually just need like basic strength to support themselves. And that is then where
Mm.
the more primitive breeds come in, to see, is it possible to breed with these horses, to also train these horses and maybe even crossbreed them in the future to breed stronger horses instead again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. And I imagine that there's, like you said, there's certain breeds where you're seeing more of this hyper mobility, this like you this sense of like breeding for flashy big huge movement.
Absolutely.
Um
Yeah.
yeah, where you're losing out on, yeah, those places where you need strength to kind of hold things together.
Well, and that's the thing.
Mhm.
I think it all depends on what is your standard. Because a lot of people, they say to me,
Right.
you cannot compare a primitive horse to a sport horse. Like these findings of those researchers, they don't correlate, for example. But
Mhm.
so then it's, what is your standard? If your standard is that you want a spectacular moving horse, that is different as if your standard is that you want a functional horse. And I think as long as humans are involved, we would always select weaker horses because they're easier for us to manage. I never
Mm-hmm.
forget when I was in a dissection with Sharon, because she also does a lot of archaeological research. And she said that from archaeological research, a lot of tribes would actually burn dominant stallions. So from that, she said, we bred with what we could manage and we ate what we couldn't. In the sense that
Yes.
if a horse is too strong or is too stubborn for us, we don't like it.
Yep.
We always like a horse that we can knead, that we can work with, that is willing to work with us. We like a horse that we can flex the neck very easily. We like a horse that can round its back, but not too much, otherwise it can easily kick us off.
Yes.
And I think that is
Yes.
somewhere, so I think it is a natural process of human interference that horses will be the weaker horses will be selected, because if they are very strong and opinionated, it's hard for us to train with them, basically. But at the same
Yep.
time, I think somewhere along the road, unintentionally, with a lot of inbreeding, yeah, it just got to a point where a lot of horses lost functionality and good sense over their own body, and balance control over their own body.
Yes. And you see, I know for myself as an equine therapist, like I see horses that don't have balance all the time, and I'm sure you see this as well in your training work.
Yeah,
Um,
I see
they,
non-ridden horses who don't control their body parts
yep,
probably. So it's not always a ridden problem.
yep,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah, yeah, for sure. And I'd love to. I mean, there's so many questions that I have. I'm just like, oh my goodness, what am I gonna
I
ask
love
next?
that. That's how my brain works. That's so cool.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
I one of the things I'd love to get into is I know that there's certain and I've heard this through my research and through some of my reading, that there's certain things that are found in dissection that you're seeing as more common in domesticated horses. Would you be willing to chat a bit about that? Some of the common threads that you're seeing in dissection?
Yeah, yeah, of course. Like then again, because what I'm seeing and what I know is because of the research of
Yep.
Sharon and Savannah. But I think one of the main things, for example, that we can pick out is that horses, primitive horses, they usually do not have full nuchal ligament lamel. So if we would look to the horse's neck, and we all know
Yep.
that a horse has 7 cervical vertebrae. And
Yep.
then to support the neck and the head, and the horse relies on surrounding structures, because gravity always pushes down. So in order for a horse to be able to lower its head and neck, which is quite heavy, it's like about 10% of the body weight, and to graze without falling over, the horse
Mm-hmm.
needs structures that counteract basically the force of gravity and support the vertebrae. And one of
Mm-hmm.
those structures is the nuchal ligament lamel. So that runs on the top line of the horse's neck. So it has a funicular cord and running over the horse's top line, and then it continues into the supraspinatus ligament over the rest of the
Yep.
spinous
Yep.
processes, and then we have the lamel attaching to the vertebrae. Now, and if you would open a random anatomy book, then you'll see that the nuchal
Yep.
ligament lamels drawn all the way from C2 to C7.
Yep.
And that would make perfect sense, because that would indicate that the entire neck is stabilized. But then
Yep.
upon dissection, we see that domesticates do not show this attachment all the way to C7, but usually only till C5.
Yes,
And in
that's
some,
what I've been reading.
yeah, and
Yeah.
in some cases only C4.
Wow.
In very rare cases, we do see horses. So I know last year there was a Welsh pony who did have it like until C6. So, but then that is like a pretty rare case. Whereas if more primitive breeds are dissected, so then we're talking like Bosnian mountain horse, zebra, donkey,
Yep.
conic horse, they all still have nuchal ligament lamel intact. So that means that the base of the neck of a lot of domesticates is not as supported as we think it is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why is that important? Because if the base of the neck is not supported, ultimately, the shoulders cannot is in riding terms, people would say lift up. And there is so much talk about you need to engage a horse's hind legs.
Yep.
And I all agree with that. But let's not forget that the hind legs, they produce horizontal force, which is forward movement.
Yep.
But it is the front limbs that mainly produce a vertical force. And it's the vertical force that produces an incline against gravity and thus balance control. So I think that the forehand is often forgotten in that story. And if you have a horse that is not properly supported through the base of the neck, the front limbs will never be able to do that job properly. And as such, the hind legs will never be able to actually get to that stage of engagement that everyone is talking about. And
yes.
yeah, as a result, what you often see is that horses just go fast, not forward, or that horses are just, hold together, because if a rider stops giving aid, the horse just collapses. There's no self-carriage anymore.
Yep.
And what is also interesting is because I am so super lucky because Savannah owns a couple of Bosnian mountain horses, and these still have full nuchal ligament lamel, and I am allowed to train with them.
Ooh.
So that was such a unique opportunity, because then I could also really feel, because all the horses I train don't have full nuchal ligament lamel.
Yep.
And their necks are usually a problem area, or the forehand, the neck, and the chest. So then I went to train with her horses, and they were so freaking straight that I didn't know what to do with it. And I actually just started to do something because I felt I needed to do something out of the experience I had of all the domesticates.
Totally.
And they were just looking at me like, what the hell, woman? Leave us alone.
We got this. We got this.
And it's amazing. And I've sat on their backs as well. So one of them is, I'm going to break in one of them as a riding horse. And so don't forget, these are wild horses. They grew up in the mountains.
Yes.
But it is amazing, because you would think, okay, it's a wild horse, but they felt, if we talk in terms of dressage about balance, straightness, self-carriage, collection, whatever, these horses have it. I felt like stupid, because my brain said you need to do something, but if I would just really feel, I didn't.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Because there's nothing that you needed to actually train or change or anything.
No, I just had to learn to keep my freaking hands off the reins. Let them have their necks. But my muscle memory, it also just goes so automatic, because I'm so used that I have to help a horse, to balance its shoulders properly.
Totally.
That is in my system. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And so often I'm sure we're doing far more than we think we are to kind of put a horse together, have them, balanced, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So I know with the nuchal ligament, we've got this potentially C6, C7, potentially C5, without the nuchal ligament attachment. I know that there's been research on C6, C7 malformation. Would love to hear more about how this nuchal ligament piece relates into that.
So far, there is not a correlation between the two conditions.
I wondered. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I wondered too, but so far there is not a correlation. So it appears that C6, C7 is more a genetical thing.
Yep.
But the research is still ongoing. At least it's a congenital thing for sure. But so far, because I've asked that question too, I've wondered with that too.
Yep.
But so far, it seems to be, two conditions that both happen to exist in the lower neck, but that there is, as so far we cannot prove there is a direct correlation or anything between the missing Nuchal Ligament lamel, and
Yep.
the C67 Malformation.
Yeah.
Now, the C67 Malformation in general, I would say, is a very discussed and heated topic at the moment, because
Yes.
I think people are getting more aware of it, but now you have like two camps. One that says it is a problem, and the other one saying it's not a problem. They don't consider it a malformation, but more a variation. So there are researchers out there who say it's a morphological variation of the vertebrae that doesn't necessarily have clinical implications. And in the beginning, when I started to do this work, I tried to just refrain from stating a very strong opinion, because I never wanted to put myself too much in the crossfire. But I've also learned that, if you don't state your opinion, then yeah, people also don't know where you stand for. So I will say that for me personally, it is a problem. From the very simple assumption that when you have an asymmetrical form, it always will come with asymmetrical forces. So for me, that's just logic. And that is what we're seeing with this malformation. The shape of the vertebrae is asymmetrical. And it can be unilateral. So basically in this malformation, what is missing are attachment points for muscles arising from the chest, which are the caudal ventral tubercle, and also neurological pathways. So it isn't just a malformation of the neck in itself, because it also has direct ramifications to the chest. Because from ultrasound and from dissections, we also know that the longus colli muscle, which is a cybernetic deep muscle under the vertebrae, cannot properly attach in case of a malformation. And there you can make a line between a nuchal ligament, because if a horse lacks the nuchal ligament lamel, so it doesn't have basically stabilization from the top, it needs more stabilization from the bottom.
Yep.
And that stabilization comes from the longus colli and the scalene. So if you also have a C67 malformation and the attachment of the longus colli is not possible, then you basically have a freaking big issue.
Yeah.
And apart from the neurological ramifications might even be bigger, because if there is one thing about these horses, is that they're predictably unpredictable.
Yes, I was going to ask how it translates into behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I cannot put it any other than that. And I think that is why a lot of researchers that do not believe in this and who state there are no clinical signs, is because behavior cannot be measured in a clinical trial in one moment over time.
Yeah.
But as an owner of these horses and my clients, I also have horses with this malformation myself.
Yep.
And it's fair to say that I have probably specialized a little bit in that. Malformation. So far I've had 67 confirmed cases that I've had on. And if you would have measured them, like for example in month February, they would not have maybe shown any clinical signs. But if you then again would have measured in April, it could be totally different. And I think that is why a lot of researchers who do not believe in this malformation as a problem, is because they don't measure that that behavioral indicator over a long period of time. And because we're talking neurons here, there is more that we don't know than what we do know. So how does it show up? Some horses, they are dangerous. But some horses are unpredictable in the sense that they are 99% of the time, they're total sweethearts. And all of a sudden, it just like literally like a wire got loose and something happens and they got all worked up. And then it's in some horses you even see that when that happens, and after a couple of seconds they even look confused. You see it confused, as if they are not understanding what just happened themselves.
Wow.
So and of course the proprioception. So horses that trip a lot.
I was gonna say
difficulty going to the farrier. And also standing on your toes. So for example, my gelding, who has it, when he stands on my toes, you can think, oh, every horse stands on a human toe every now and then, that just happens.
Yep.
But the thing is, he literally doesn't know. Like, if my mare would do it, and I would tell her, hey, go off, what are you doing? She would be like, oh yeah, shoot, yeah, something strange is under my foot. This is not supposed. He has no clue. He just looks at me.
Wow.
He does not feel when his foot goes to the concrete, to the surface of my foot.
Yep.
And
He
it's
doesn't feel the difference.
no, he doesn't. And in general, these type of horses, they find it difficult to put the leg to the side. They tend to struggle with that. But yeah, they just don't have good body control. Like, they can be labeled as clumsy, I would
Yes.
say. But
Yes.
because the range of behavioral indicators can be so wide, I cannot give you like a list of, okay, yeah, if you see this and this, it's likely going to be C67. So
Yep.
I think a lot of it with this malformation is experience. And to combine the behavioral indicators, of course, with the clinical indicators. So clinical
Yep.
indicators are in feet balance. So usually a unilateral malformation, you see high heel, low heel.
Yep.
Bilateral malformation, feet go to the outside.
Okay. So they're are they tilted like in the hoof or?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and just stance. Yeah, so
Yep.
because they adopt that stance, so naturally they will
Yep.
also start to get that medial lateral balance.
Yep. Yep.
And yeah, asymmetry in chest development, especially if it's unilateral, because of that longer
Yep.
scrollae attachment. But also scoliosis in the lumbar spine.
Oh, in the lumbar spine. Okay.
So far,
Yep.
with both C6 and C7, that's a one-on-one.
Yep.
That's a one-on-one.
It That's very interesting.
Yeah,
That's very interesting. I often think of the spine as very reciprocal, like cervicals with lumbar. So I find that fascinating.
yeah. And
Okay.
T1. So if you have C67, T1 is usually messed up as well.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
that usually,
Yeah.
of course, doesn't get diagnosed because you cannot get T1 on a
It's
radiograph
it's
properly.
so hard to get. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Under the scapula. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, that usually is really, really horribly damaged as well. But I
Yep.
know that Sharon even said that also teeth balance can be affected.
Interesting.
So
Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
it's such a range of problems, and I think by now I usually go with gut feeling
Yep.
because I've seen a lot of these horses. So sometimes people come with me and a horse is with a behavioral problem and they think, oh, maybe it's C67. And sometimes I go with it and sometimes I say no. And it's just, I cannot explain it otherwise than experience probably and gut feeling from what I've dealt with so far. Um, but I train myself, of course, because if I think it is, then I always ask, okay, I really want you to get it confirmed with ICRAE so that I can also for myself do
Yep.
research. How many times
Yep.
was I right and how many times was I wrong in my estimate?
Totally.
And
Totally.
it is fair to say that I have been wrong a couple of times, but a lot of these times the horse did not have C67 malformation, but actually arthritis. So lower
Mm.
neck arthritis can come
Yep.
up with exactly the same symptoms because it also often results in spinal cord compression.
Yes. Yes. Um, I have a client as well who has tendency towards extreme sternum compaction, and she tends to have some of that stuff as well. Um,
Yeah,
just that sense of
yeah,
things being super congested through the chest
yeah,
region.
and a wavy sternum as well. That can also go with these problems. Yeah,
Interesting. So what would that? So a wavy sternum. So just not.
not
How would
great.
that kind of present in the dissection? I don't think so. It doesn't sound great.
Yeah, I was just saying, and this, because this is always funny questions because I'm trying to recollect in my own mind because you start to get so used to using these
Yes.
terms and yeah, wavy sternum is literally just a crooked sternum. I think I can just
Yep.
put it the best way like that. It's in a wavy kind
Yep.
of shape, which it is not
Totally.
supposed to. I mean, I think in every horse the sternum is not fully centered.
Yes.
I think most horses still have a little bit of a, but then the sternum itself is straight. But if the
Yes,
sternum
exactly.
itself is not in a straight pattern,
Yep.
yeah, then of course that is not very beneficial.
Not really, no. And it's obviously being pulled on by some things. When I see that, I think, okay, where's the, where is it being kind of forced or pushed or pulled or, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I
things
mean,
happening.
yeah, because and that's the thing, or it's the complication and the beauty of biomechanics. Because if one thing is
Yes,
affected, everything else kind of goes.
totally.
So that you usually do not just have an issue at the sternum or an issue in the neck. It's like the whole region that you're dealing with. I mean, that's why, I mean,
Yep.
I love that you call it like the whole horse podcast, because um, that's what you're dealing with. It's a holistic being,
Mm,
and that's always the complication of it, that everything
yes,
goes. But at the same time, there's then also the beauty that if you know your way around it a little bit, by improving one small thing, you can improve the whole area in a big way.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think that, that's probably part of what motivates you and I in terms of me with my body work and and that sort of work, and then you with the biomechanical like training um aspect too, is like how do we help while they're alive, like to so that they're can lead a happier, healthier life, right?
Yeah, exactly.
um
And
yeah.
how can, for me also the challenge is, how can I make it clear for the owner and easy for the owner to do, because it usually can be quite overwhelming and it can be a lot to deal with.
I can imagine. And I would love to jump just for a second here, Thirza,
Yeah,
to a little bit more of your training work. I want to come back to some of the things that you commonly find in dissection.
yeah,
Um, but I really find the combination that you have here of your biomechanical dissection knowledge, your anatomical, you have incredible anatomical knowledge. I'm constantly like, oh my gosh, I follow your posts and I have to read them several times
and
over.
Dawn, I
I
just
I love them. I love them. Your one on the
okay.
trapezius lately was like, oh my goodness. If you're not
Me
following
trying to
Thirza, you
make sense of my own thoughts.
so good. It's so good because it's like it's putting more nuance into it, and I think when people recognize some things that they can see in their horses as they're standing before them, that they can help with now. I think, most horse people are coming from a place where, one, they want to help their horse, and two, they may feel either overwhelmed or like they just don't have the tools to support the changes that want to happen. So I would love to chat with you about, what your training, how it kind of combines these pieces, these passions of yours.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
All up for it. So for me, it's like, okay, so my main interest area, because I came of a background of being a rider before this,
Hmm.
before the whole biomechanics thing started to come into play. So for me, my quest was, um, because after my first dissection, I was like, okay, maybe I should just give up riding altogether.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, you see all those issues, and you're like, oh, I think I should set my horse loose and get over it.
Totally.
But then, of course, you start to come back on your feet and into the real life, and to say, yeah, well, that's not helping them either. They would probably be dead by tomorrow if I would set them loose.
Yes.
And for me, it was okay. So then, how can I still use movement? Because horses ultimately are movers, and we all know that. And they often actually don't move enough. So I'm not talking then about training, but just movement when they are domesticated. And how can I help or the horse through movement to, yeah, release certain tensions in the body, and at the same times to stabilize certain structures if they need to. So I'm basically trying to use movement to also create yeah, I would say healthy compensation patterns, because compensation is a natural process in the body. So how would that like translate into like a training program? So for me, let's consider I have a horse with a hip joint issue. Then I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking, okay, hip joints, that is pretty deep, so we cannot really do a lot about that in terms of therapy. Yes, you can do your body work, but like medically speaking, there's not a lot you can do at the moment for a horse's hip joint. So then,
Yep.
what I can do is to say, okay, which muscles surround the hip joint? So how can I, which exercises or which movement patterns can I use to train these muscles so that they can stabilize the joint and support it to a better extent. So that is basically how I work to see if I can, yeah, come up with these solutions. And
Mm.
I try to keep it simple, but I cannot make it simpler than the complexity allows, I always say.
Yes.
Be-
Yes.
yeah, because it isn't simple, and a lot of people, they come to me and they just want me to tell them what they need to do. But it's sometimes so difficult to put it in, like, I cannot put it into terms or into concepts, like, do 2 circles to the left and 2 circles to the right, come back next month and it will be all fine.
Yeah.
Because it might be that doing those circles are good on one day, but maybe the next day the horse is moving a little bit different, and that might be because it has a bad day, or it might be because your training of the last day had effect. So then you need to already do something else. So
Yeah.
for me, it's each day to consider, okay, how is the horse moving and what does the horse need? So then it starts for me with two things, because first of all, you need to have tools in your tool bag. Because if I observe a horse and I think this horse would really benefit from a good shoulder in, but the horse doesn't know the shoulder in exercise, the rider or the trainer doesn't know the shoulder in exercise, then then I cannot give them that advice, because they first have to learn the exercise. So for
Yep.
me, the process starts always with the communication, that you need to teach a horse certain postures to certain aids.
Yep.
So then you can create the tools in your tool bag. And then from that moment, when you have that communication, to say, okay, now how can I really use those exercises for a certain purpose? And that purpose can be soundness, that purpose can be stabilization, that purpose can be flexibility. So that, or
Mm.
even like stamina, weight loss, like you have multiple purposes.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a process each day. So for with certain horses, I might do straight lines and squares for 4 weeks, and with other
Yep.
horses, I might do something different every day, and I might do very complicated lateral exercise sequences. Um, so I cannot always just put it into words. I always say the exercises I do or I advise, it's not like I invent the wheel, because everything has been done before. Let's be clear about that. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to invent a whole new range of exercises that we can do with the horse, but it's more about how you apply them and how you approach them, and which you can still, yeah, gain around. So I do not reinvent the wheel. I just try to keep it back rolling in the right direction, and to really say I want functionality. So if something is not functional, so if there's an injury or an inflammation, then my first job is to restore functionality. And if functionality is there, then my second job is to allow the horse to move with, yeah, maximal efficiency and minimal effort, because that's how they move in nature as well. They always
Mm-hmm.
like to just use minimal effort, so that they only have to use the muscles necessary to do the movement, but nothing more than that.
Yes.
And that's a whole process.
I bet. I bet. And you know what? I come from a very what would we call it out here? Like, I call it get it done horsemanship. This what I learned when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And it's really kind of, it's sunk in over the years more and more and more and more how sort of degrading on the horse that is on a number of levels, but in this case
Oh,
um,
absolutely.
physically degrading on
their body, that they are not capable of compensating to such an extent to be able to not be harmed by, what we're asking oftentimes, and the way that we're asking them to move and how we're asking that movement to happen. And I'm sure you see that all the time with
Yeah,
your
because
work.
for people it's leisure. So leisure
Yeah.
means you need to have fun, and it needs to be a relaxing experience for you. But I don't think that works with a horse. I mean, it can go together sometimes, but for me, a horse is not just a leisure. Like, it's a lifelong relationship or investment, or and yes, some days it goes together, that you have fun and you both relax. But on some days, I think you need to have that ability to say, okay, I do something that I might not enjoy, but I do it for my horse's welfare. So if you
Mhm.
find it very boring to walk your horse on straight lines, yeah, I get that. I don't always necessarily feel very much joy when I need to, tape my horse because it has or mummified almost because my horse had done something in the paddock. I'm always like,
Yes, right.
oh, really? Here we go again. But that's how a relationship works. And yeah, and even now, I think there's a whole shift that people start to realize that educating or training with a horse or being with a horse, it takes time. But when it really comes to practice, then I think people are still tended to take a shortcut. And I have to say, I mean, I'm also human, so let's include myself in the equation as
Mhm.
well. And it
Yep,
happens to the best
absolutely.
of us, because also for me, I sometimes feel like, oh, I'm an instructor and people think I have a lot of knowledge. So when I have a demonstration, I really need to show that my horses move beautifully in light. And then at that moment, my horse says, fuck off. No. And then you're like, oh my God, I'm feeling so embarrassed. But that is, yeah, that's the process of being with horses. And when people come and watch me, they sometimes see me only doing very boring stuff, and it doesn't go right straight away. Yes, I have footage, or I can show them a demonstration in which I can do a perfect piaffe and my horse is in balance. But it could have taken me 10 years to get there, and it might be that one day it does, work out, and then the next day it doesn't. Because with the most of the horses I work with, we're not talking about solving issues or fixing issues. We're talking about managing them.
Yes.
So these horses have chronic conditions. So there will always be days in which they feel good, and then days that they don't feel good, and it starts to play up. So you
Yeah,
cannot always expect a constant performance with these horses. That's not fair. It's
absolutely.
constant managing, and to say, okay, are you having a good day today? Is it actually possible to train? Yes and no. And some horses actually need the training to stay sound, which in essence is not a good thing. But a lot of warm bloods of today, they need it. Like, they will not they will not do well without any training.
Yep.
But yeah, the other hand, I mean, if a horse is C67, there will be months in which they will be not able to deal with anything or take up any information, simply because they are always dealing with a chronic thing in the body.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that takes then up the energy. So sometimes they have energy left to take up new information for training. Sometimes they don't, because their whole body is, processing the information internal that comes from internal stress or internal worry or whatever.
Yes, and that takes up a lot of bandwidth. I mean, being a person that has had injuries and pain and chronic pain and things, like, I am really grumpy when I am in pain. Like, I don't learn well. I don't get a lot done, and I know, in my heart that horses feel the same way, where when they're in pain, that's occupying a lot of bandwidth.
Absolutely, yeah, no. I mean, I'm not even. Yeah, I wouldn't be a nice person when I'm in pain as well. No, I wouldn't. And I would probably be the same, because I would try to not show it,
Yeah.
but I would still be, a little bit bitchy,
Yeah.
demanding. And yeah, and then as you say, because then in horses, people would say, oh, it's just a mare. She's just being a mare. You're like, no, I'm not sure. I don't really think so. And it takes, I think, a lot of stretch to be able, as humans, to then really say, okay, today we'll let our expectations go. And I think that's always
Yes.
a struggle because our human brain can only think from a human centric perspective. So we always want a direct approach, and we are planning. So we're always planning something in advance. So
Mm-hmm.
we wake up and think, okay, today at 2 a.m., I go to the stable, and today I want to have a trail ride. Dot.
Yep.
And then that's what we do. And not a second do we think, okay, maybe this time is not suited for the horse, or maybe not today, maybe tomorrow. And because our brain just doesn't allow that, because we always assume that every species think that way, because that is how our brains are rewired. Like, we have a big frontal lobe that always keeps busy with planning and goal oriented behavior, but the horse doesn't have a frontal lobe as much as we do. So we can never expect those brains like to match up, basically.
Yep. Yep.
um and yeah, we are the ones wanting something, so I think it's only fair that then we try to submerge to how their brain functions instead of the other way around. But that is, I think, the challenge, and I think that's really where you have the difference between people with horses and horse people.
Yes. Good distinction.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I saw it for years where I would be like, I love horses, and then I look back and I'm like, I did not love horses. I mean, I thought that I loved horses, but I was not loving towards horses,
No.
I guess we could say,
But
right? Like I was not loving towards horses. Yeah, yeah.
but wouldn't you also say that's like part of the journey? Because when
I think so.
look back to footage of myself riding competition like 10 years ago, I would look at those footage and think, oh my god, I was like an animal abuser, and I would feel
Mhm.
horrible. I have felt horrible towards my horse, but at
Yeah.
the same time, you I like you cannot do what you do not know.
That's the thing. We only know what we know, right?
And back
Yeah.
then, everybody told me, your horse is naughty, and when you just give it a good whack, it will just, do whatever
Mhm.
you want.
Totally.
But,
Totally.
and deep down, you have to search further, but it just takes years to get there. And then even the struggle still continues. And that makes it, I guess, so difficult, because I'm the same as you say. Like, I thought I loved my horse, but if I look back on it, I think, oh my gosh, what have I put her through? And
Yes.
no, and of course, because our relationship is deeper than ever. Like, back then I thought I had a good relationship, but now I know, like, oh no, it wasn't. And now
Right?
we do, but it just, yeah, it isn't black and white. And I think that's what I really love about dissections, because there is no argument there.
Yeah.
When you go on social media or Facebook or Instagram, and people put up pictures of their horse, there will always be someone, that finds a criticism, or finds, starts up a discussion. And sometimes they're right, sometimes they're not right in your opinion. And what I love about the dissection is that there is no human opinions involved. It's just unraveling what the horse shows. And the muscles are either good or they're not. The bones are either arthritic or they're not.
Yep.
And I think that is for me that because I think, as you say, that I have the same that you feel. I want to learn from the horse,
Mhm.
because they have the knowledge. And how can I do that? Or and for me that was, I think, what really struck me with doing the dissections, because for me that's the only way in which the horse is really the teacher.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
and yeah, and that's why I'm like, oh, I have to keep doing this, and I have to keep doing as many as I can, and share this knowledge as well, because it is not my knowledge, but it's the horse's knowledge. And then at least also the story of that horse will not be forgotten. And yeah,
Mm.
I hope it would be really awesome in September if you would have the live dissection.
Oh,
I
please,
Yeah,
yes.
I hope you'll like it. But I think from talking to you, I think you have the same mind that I do to
Mhm.
that extent,
Mhm.
because I think, yeah, and I think everyone who does a dissection, I mean, I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, and that's fine. Like, I don't want to put down on anyone that doesn't feel comfortable with it, but no one that I've spoken to that went to a dissection didn't say that it didn't change their life or their opinion about the horse. And I wish we could just have more of that people just unite in wanting to learn from the horse, and less people just arguing about people's opinions about horses.
Yes. Yes. I always think that there could be like a million different opinions about things, and so I love that the beauty of that certainty, and that you share how that I kind of, one of the reasons I'm so interested in dissection is I'm quite morbid as well. I wrote a book on navigating pet loss and death and dying, and that's like a area where I tend to work a lot. And I just love the idea, because I talk a lot about how we honor our animals after they pass, and it just touches me so deeply to, with this process, that these horses have their stories, um, you know, understood. Like there's a sense of completion in that, and it's very beautiful.
Oh wow, yeah, that sounds. What is the book called?
It's called Death Sucks.
Oh, but I love that because death is a part of life, you know. So
Yeah, yeah,
because
and it's hard.
yeah, but at the same time, it's also good, you know, to have a little bit of a laugh because
I think so too. Yep.
I mean, when we are at the dissection, we laugh. There
Totally.
is laughter, but
Yeah.
because it is serious, but there's laughter. And but do you also do you communicate as well for owners before, like,
Yes,
if the
I
work
do.
goes? Yeah,
I do.
yeah.
Yeah, and I do that a lot with horse people, and horses are very specific often about what they want. So
Oh
I
really?
yeah, like they'll tell me uh like what they want to be buried with. Some are like where they want to be buried, how that process goes, who they would like to be there. Oh yeah, it can get very specific. So
Oh wow.
and then oftentimes I'm working more with the human to really come to terms with their fear and
Yeah,
emotion around the passing and the letting go. So that's most of the time I find the horses are like, "Yep, I'm ready. Let's do this."
yeah.
And they're ready to be free of their bodies that are hurting, and it's more the humans that we help along, because for us it can be a lot harder to be in that space of letting go. So yeah, yeah,
That's interesting. So would you say that when, like, most times when you go out, that actually the horses confirm that it's always the right choice?
yes, almost always,
Yeah,
yeah, especially if the human is like, I think that this is what needs to happen. Like I would say almost every
yeah,
time the horse is like, yep, totally. When what time?
yeah.
They're
But
they're very ready, and often, yeah, there's a process, like they're like, make sure that my herd mates can come and be with me, make sure that, there's a process that happens, and then that honoring piece comes up a lot, and I just love this weaving in of the dissection work around that as well. So it's a very important kind of closing for everybody to feel that sense of honoring of what we have learned through that life. Yeah,
yeah, wow, that
yeah.
sounds, yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. So there you go. We're coming to the end of our hour, which I'm incredibly sad about. I just I just want
Oh
to
no,
keep
it's so
chatting. I
sad. I
know.
hope
It's
I
so
didn't talk
sad.
too much because I know, like, I know I need to learn that, that other people can speak too. So I hope that I didn't
Oh,
interrupt you too much or anything because,
not at all. It's been so great. I have this huge smile on my face. I have like
oh,
little
okay,
like
cool.
tears in my eyes in good ways. No, I'm very, very moved, and I can't wait to chat again. I'm sure I know that there's more that we can chat
Yeah.
about, and
I
I'm sure,
it's
you
just,
know.
yeah, like I'm not, I never want to be rude, but I know that sometimes when I just, start talking about this, then I just don't shut up anymore.
I
So,
love it. It's called
yeah,
passion.
yeah, true, but it's probably genuine. But no, I really loved it, and it works so well. I mean, you're all
Yes.
the way in Canada, I'm all the way here in Amsterdam, and I don't feel there's any space or time between.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
really
I love
nice.
it.
Yeah.
I love it. So, Thursday, before we finish today, I would love for you to share how people can get in touch with you, can find you and your work. Yeah, where would they head to find you? And we'll list this as well at the wholehorse.ca page, so you can head there for
Yeah.
resources.
Yeah, so the
Mm-hmm.
best way is like my website, which is www.thirzahendriks.com. And I
Yep.
basically offer two things. So I have an online program, especially now during Corona time, where people can join and then they can send me footage of the horse and I help them do an assessment of their horse and I give them training advice and exercises on how to
Fantastic.
improve the horse, and then we have regular meetings so they can improve. And then hopefully, when the travel ban is lifted, I can come out again during my clinics. And of course, we have the dissections. And I also really want to fill in on the website of my colleague, Savannah Vermeulen. So that is
Mm-hmm.
www.equinestudies.nl. Because of every dissection, she also hosts webinars. So after the dissection, she will do a presentation of when the horse was still alive, so the assessment videos of the horse, all the findings of the dissection, and then the skeleton that she has prepared, which is
Oh my
really
goodness.
cool. And in September, we have another dissection coming up together. So with Savannah. And we'll also do that one online, but you'll find it on both our websites. So that is probably the
Fantastic.
two things. So the dissection webinar, the case studies, and I have the online program, and that should be enough for anyone interested.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Great. Oh my gosh, I'm going to head over and look at the September course because I think that I'm definitely in for that. And for anybody out there that is geeky like us, this is an incredible opportunity because normally you'd have to travel to Europe or different places to get this opportunity. So definitely check that out. Thirza, thank you for being here. I can't thank you enough. It's been an honor and a pleasure. Hmm.
Same for me. I wish we could meet up all together at Lien's again at some stage, and then
Yes,
have a
yes.
drink and
I'm
talk.
sure she's listening in right now.
Yeah.
And yes, for all you other listeners out there, thanks for tuning in. And I'll be back soon with more great episodes. I'm looking forward to it. Okay, everybody. Bye for now.
To share that I am, loving doing remote sessions with some of you. I've been so grateful to hear from you and work with you and your horses. So thanks for that. And I hope I get to do more of that. If you're interested in a remote session with me, you can always email me at alexa@alexalinton.com. Okay, have a wonderful week.